There is a room in Brussels most people have never heard of. The Berlaymont Building, 13th floor, room 1312. Windowless, soundproof, climate controlled to exactly 19 degrees C, because that's what the servers require. For 76 years, that room housed the secure communication link between the European Commission and the United States Department of State. A direct encrypted line tested daily. The physical cord of the transatlantic partnership. Through the Marshall Plan, NATO expansion, counterterrorism coordination, trade wars, financial crises, every conversation that mattered between Europe and America passed through that room. This morning at 9:47 a.m. Central European Time, a technician disconnected the server and wheeled it out on a dolly. The line is dead. Not because it failed, because Brussels decided it no longer needs it. 4 hours later, Ursula von der Leyen stood in the European Parliament in Strasbourg beside the flags of 27 EU member states and 4 others, Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, and New Zealand. Next to her stood Mark Carney. She announced the Atlantic Commonwealth Strategic Integration Framework, a binding $120 billion economic and security partnership between the European Union and what is now being called the Commonwealth Coalition. This is not a trade deal, not a memorandum. It is structural integration. Combined GDP of $35 trillion. Combined population of 2.7 billion, coordinated defense procurement, harmonized regulations, integrated currency stabilization, joint semiconductor production, synchronized technology standards. And one unspoken design principle: build the post-American world now. Carney didn't speak much. He nodded, the architect watching another beam lock into place. And the man who made this inevitable was not in Strasbourg. He was at Mar-a-Lago, posting in all caps 17 times in 23 minutes, because he genuinely cannot comprehend that the European Union, an institution he once called worse than China, just replaced the United States with Canada as its primary strategic partner. 9 days ago, this would have sounded impossible. It began with a phone call, a scheduled call between Donald Trump and von der Leyen. State Department briefings were clear: reaffirm partnership, avoid threats, discuss burden sharing collaboratively. According to multiple diplomatic sources, Trump ignored every word. He demanded Europe raise defense spending to 5% of GDP within 2 years. He demanded elimination of all tariffs on American goods. He demanded a full ban on Chinese firms. And then he said the line that changed everything: without the United States, Europe is nothing. We rebuilt you. We protected you. You owe us. If you don't pay, maybe we let Russia handle you. 11 seconds of silence followed. Von der Leyen responded calmly that partnership is not extortion. Then she ended the call. Within 90 minutes, she was on a secure line with Carney and senior European leaders. Within 48 hours, ambassadors in Ottawa, London, and Canberra received classified instructions to prepare frameworks outside the U.S. alliance structure. The call was not the cause. It was the trigger. Weeks earlier, Germany's Federal Intelligence Service had completed a classified assessment concluding that U.S. policy volatility posed a greater short-term threat to European economic stability than Russia or China, not militarily, economically. The unpredictability of tariffs, the weaponization of the dollar, the possibility of NATO abandonment created acute risk. Contingency planning began immediately. Currency diversification, defense industrial autonomy, alternative democratic partnerships. The Commonwealth talks did not begin after the call. They began months ago. For 7 months, quiet working groups rotated between Ottawa, Brussels, London, and Canberra. Mutual recognition of product standards. Joint fighter jet production combining European engineering with Canadian avionics. Semiconductor fabs in Germany and Canada. Currency swap networks reducing dependence on the Federal Reserve. This wasn't reaction, it was construction. The announcement was a ribbon cutting. Markets understood instantly. The euro surged nearly 3% against the dollar in hours. The Canadian and Australian dollars climbed. European equities jumped sharply. Meanwhile, U.S. indices fell. Defense contractors dropped as investors calculated what it means if Europe shifts procurement inward. Treasury yields spiked as speculation mounted that European central banks may reduce dollar reserves. Money does not react to speeches. It reacts to structural change. And this is structural. Trump's response only reinforced the shift. He called Europe foolish. He called Carney irrelevant. He threatened to withdraw troops from Europe. He ordered a review of NATO commitments. European officials reading those posts reportedly felt relief. Relief that their contingency planning was justified. Relief that the instability was public and undeniable. This rupture is psychological as much as geopolitical. Trump views alliances hierarchically. Protection in exchange for tribute. But Europe is not a vassal state. It is 27 sovereign nations with a combined economy comparable to the United States. Von der Leyen is not anti-American. She built her career defending the transatlantic alliance. For someone like her to formalize a structure excluding Washington signals a conclusion already reached. The alliance, as previously structured, was no longer reliable. Carney's strategy is different. He does not threaten. He builds alternatives. He constructs exits and leaves the door open. When volatility rises, partners walk through it. This is not about ideology. It is about risk management. What does this mean for Americans? A stronger euro makes European imports more expensive. A weaker dollar raises the cost of everything denominated in foreign currency. If European markets pivot toward harmonized Commonwealth supply chains, U.S. exporters face tougher competition. If central banks diversify reserves, demand for U.S. debt softens, potentially raising borrowing costs. None of this happens overnight, but direction matters in global finance. Direction shapes investment flows. Security implications are equally profound. NATO is more than troops. It is intelligence integration, logistics, interoperability. If Europe deepens coordination with Commonwealth partners while questioning U.S. reliability, influence shifts gradually. Institutions rarely collapse in a single moment. They erode. Several scenarios now unfold. One possibility is gradual NATO hollowing, formal existence but practical divergence. Another is accelerated currency diversification, reducing dollar centrality in global reserves. A third is expansion of this framework to additional democracies seeking stability through diversified alignment. None of these scenarios require hostility toward America. They require uncertainty about America. The deeper question is whether this is temporary turbulence or long-term transformation. Alliances depend on trust, and trust depends on predictability. Markets price predictability. Governments plan around it. When predictability weakens, systems rebalance. For 76 years, the transatlantic link symbolized shared architecture. That architecture survived Cold War standoffs, financial crises, and political disagreements because its foundation was mutual confidence. Disconnecting a server does not end a partnership, but it signals readiness to operate without it. History rarely announces its pivots. It accumulates signals until one day the signal becomes unmistakable. A server unplugged, a framework signed, currencies moving, leaders recalculating. Whether this becomes a permanent reordering or a temporary shock depends on choices made next. But one fact is undeniable. Europe has demonstrated it has options. And in geopolitics, options change everything.